We're delighted to have Congressman LaHood speak to us. He represents an historic district, the district that Abraham Lincoln represented for one term in the House, a district that Scott Lucas represented when he was in the House, who later became the majority leader of the U.S. Senate, district that Everett Dirksen represented in the House before he became minority leader of the U.S. Senate, a district that Harold Velde represented, who had a staff assistant named Robert Michael, who went on to become congressman from that district and House Minority Leader. And in Congressman Michael's office was the Chief of Staff, Ray LaHood, who has come on board as the congressman and who, in fact, is one of the keen parliamentarians in the House. And if they have a snarl in the House and difficulty, usually you'll see, if you watch C-SPAN, they send out for Mr. LaHood to preside because of his reputation of fairness and savvy and knowledge of the House procedures. He is a great Illinoisan. He is a member of the House Appropriations Committee, and he has a kind of independence that bodes well for the people he represents, whom he has served for 10 years, and probably, I predict, in the future, as he's a young man, will become one of the true great national congressmen and leaders of the House of Representatives. I give you the Honorable Ray LaHood. Okay?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. He asked me if it was okay. Of course it was okay. The reason I came here is because he wrote a nice column about me. In case you haven't seen it, I've got copies for you. Anytime Rosa writes something nice about you, you need to distribute it widely. Thank you, Tom, very much. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to talk till 1 o'clock and then answer questions. And I'm going to talk about 4 things, and then you can ask questions about anything that you would like. I served 1 year in the Illinois House of Representatives. I was appointed in 1982 and served with Diana Nelson and Jill Zwick, and it's great to see both of you again. And you both look exactly the same as you did in 1982. It's good of you to come. Thank you. And Senator, thank you for being here to hold up our end over here. These are all spies that were sent here by these Democrat members to find out what I'm saying. So in any event, I'm glad you're over there to give them an elbow or whatever. Again, thank you all very much. I hail from Peoria. I represent 20 counties in central Illinois. I'm starting my 5th term in Congress. It is a great, great privilege to serve in the House of Representatives. I love the House very much. I think if you stay around long enough, you can do an awful lot of good in the House, and I hope to be able to stay around at least for 10 more years and continue to work with a lot of folks who are here today. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, we've met with many of you and talked about the important projects that you're trying to get accomplished for this part of Illinois. I really see my role on the Appropriations Committee as not just representing the 20 counties, but really doing the best that I can with my friend Senator Durbin and others in our delegation to do what we can do for Illinois and to get our fair share of dollars for Illinois. I did have the privilege of touring the Haymarket program. It is a great program. Monsignor Mack has done just a marvelous job of putting together a great, great team of people, and it's a very, very good organization. And so we're going to do what we can along the way in our role on the Appropriations Committee. Let me just talk about 4 things: the war, the economy, health care, and politics. And we're probably very close to invading Iraq, but since 9/11, we've been in a war against terrorism off our shores and in our own country. We've spent an enormous amount of money since 9/11. Prior to 9/11, we had a huge surplus in Washington. Every member of Congress and the Senate was trying to figure out ways to spend the money. Since 9/11, we've given New York City between $20 and $40 billion. We gave the airline industry $15 billion. Every new employee that's been hired in airports today to screen people are now federal employees. They did not exist before 9/11. Every piece of equipment that now checks luggage that goes in the belly of the plane or on top in the plane, all new equipment, all paid for by the taxpayers. And when you account for all of that money, plus the war in Afghanistan, which cost about $1 billion a month during the time that we went into Afghanistan and really got Al-Qaeda out of there and captured some very important people, that war cost $1 billion a month. And so people say, you know, why are we in a deficit? It's because we're spending a lot of money on the war on terrorism in our own country. Last year, Congress authorized 1,000 new FBI agents, 1,000 new CIA agents. They're now being recruited and trained, and eventually they'll be the new line of defense in our own country. We've hired new Border Patrol people, and we've hired people at INS. And Lord knows we need them at INS. We need to find people in this country who are here illegally and or here to do us in. And so all of these things have been very, very costly. The notion that the debt or the deficit's been created by some kind of a tax cut is nonsense. It's been created by the fact a lot of the tax cut hasn't even clicked in yet. It hasn't even reached its full bloom. We're in a deficit because we're spending an enormous amount of money to fight the war on terrorism off our shores and within our own country. I think within a few days we will probably invade Iraq. People are really conflicted about it. People in my district are conflicted about it. People in Illinois are conflicted, and people in the country are. Most of the polls show that the majority of people support the president. Some people are not quite sure why they do. People are not really sure why we should be invading Iraq, but the president has made his case, and he's working very hard to get the United Nations to pass another resolution. I think whether the UN passes it or not, I think we're very close to invading Iraq. That war will probably cost about $100 billion, and that will not account for the money that it will take to go back in and reestablish a new regime. It will not account for the money it will take probably for us to be there for the next 10 years to stabilize the country. But the president's committed to it. Congress passed a resolution with almost 400 votes in the House and 83 votes in the Senate. Some members of the House and Senate would like us to re-vote it, but that's not going to happen. That resolution is passed. It gave the president the authority to do it, and the president is moving ahead. And the notion that there are just a very few countries that are with us is not accurate. There's about 30 to 40 countries that are with us. Unfortunately, France and Germany get all the publicity, but there are a lot of countries that are with us. Tony Blair's put his political career on the line, and the reason I think the president has forestalled the activity in Iraq is to really give Tony Blair some additional cover while he tries to make his case with the UN too. But I think war is inevitable, and we can talk more about that if you want to. The economy is in very bad shape, and it's not because interest rates aren't in good shape. We have the lowest interest rates that I can remember. People can refinance their houses probably for 5% or less. We just locked in an interest rate on a place in our hometown of Peoria for less than 5%. So interest rates are low, inflation is low, unemployment's creeping up a little bit. The problem is the stock market. There is no confidence in the stock market. And you have a lot of middle-income people. The average wage earner in my district is between $25,000 and $50,000. That's about what the average person makes. Their problem is, and their anxiety about the economy is that over the last 2 years they've seen their 401k invested in the stock market, and they've gotten their quarterly reports and seen it just go in the tank. Some have lost $200, $2,000. People with more invested have lost an enormous amount of money. And so the president has proposed a fairly bold so-called stimulus package, which I'm not that gung-ho about. And I'll tell you why, because I think we ought to speed up the tax cut that we passed 2 years ago. That was passed on the promise that we were going to stimulate the economy and create jobs. And we ought to speed that up. That was a 10-year tax cut. And we ought to make permanent the elimination of the inheritance tax, which would help a lot of small business people and farmers. And we ought to make permanent the elimination of the marriage tax penalty. That would help the middle-income wage earner in this country. The idea of the double taxation of dividends causes heartburn with about that segment of the people in our economy. the vast majority of people, in my opinion, and I don't always like to disagree with the president on this, but his stimulus package I don't think really helps the average ordinary person out there that's going to work every day. And I think if we speed up the tax cut and accelerate the one we passed 2 years ago, we do really a lot more to help our economy and really maybe get the economy jump-started and get the stock market going. But I'm swimming upstream on this one. And the president's going to push very hard for his stimulus package and for his tax cuts. He'll probably get everything he wants in the House and half of what he wants in the Senate. And a year from now, the war will not be an issue, but we'll be smack dab in the middle of a presidential campaign, and the economy will be the issue. Are people working? Are they making money? Is the stock market rebounding? Are people showing some kind of a return on their investment in the stock market? That's going to be the issue. The president knows that. That's why he put a new economic team in place and got rid of his Secretary of the Treasury and his economic advisors and brought a whole new team in. But they've been on Capitol Hill trying to sell his stimulus package, and I think he'll get what he wants in the House almost totally and half of the Senate, and then he'll probably end up with half of what he wants. So yesterday in the House we passed a so-called tort reform bill, which sets liability caps at $250,000 on pain and suffering. I think it's a good bill. I supported it. I think there's only 2 or 3 things Congress can do to bring down health care costs. One of them is try and rein in the idea that anybody can go out and sue a hospital or a doctor and hit the lottery. The country is sue crazy. And with all due respect to any of the trial lawyers in the room, there's 1 million lawyers lined up outside the door waiting to take their case. And you've got doctors leaving the medical profession. You've got hospitals closing because they can't afford malpractice insurance. And I believe the bill that we passed yesterday in the House is a good bill. I believe it's one of the steps that we can take to rein in the high cost of health care. We have the best health care in the world in our country. If you get sick in America, you can find a place usually that'll find a cure for you or a doctor. That's not the problem. The problem is that there are people that don't have access to it, and I think we ought to deal with that. There are 40 million people who don't have health insurance. And there's a great article in the Sun-Times today, and I really hope that you would take a look at it, that outlines a major problem with health care, and that is that people don't have access. So what happens is they show up at the emergency room with the flu or a cold or some kind of ailment. They get taken care of, but all of those who have health insurance pay the cost of that because they pass it on to us. And that drives up the cost of health insurance. So I think tort reform is good. I think some kind of a plan to take care of the 40 million people, many of whom who work in jobs that don't have health care offered to them, or many of them who work in jobs and they can't afford health insurance because they don't make enough money. And Congress really should address that. But the one startling statistic, if I can read it, is that 1 in 5 people, and I think this is in Illinois, 1 in 5 have absolutely no health insurance, and these are people that are working. And so it's not for a lack of a job, it's for the fact that they don't make enough money or their company doesn't provide the health insurance, and it's a problem. I believe in making health insurance premiums 100% deductible. We've done that in the tax code, but it takes probably 2 or 3 more years for that to happen. It's good for small business people. It's good for farmers who pay an enormous amount of money for their own health insurance premiums. So, and we probably need some kind of Medicare reform, which we'll probably do this year, but it'll be tied to a prescription drug plan. I mean, these are the 4 or 5 things we're doing in terms of health care. The tort reform, I think, is good. And there's we had a big debate, a raging debate about this in the House yesterday. There isn't unanimity on this. But I do think it will help drive down health care costs. We need to take care of the 40 million people who don't have health insurance. We're going to have to create a prescription drug plan because you all know that your grandmothers and aunts and uncles who live on a fixed income, get a good program in Medicare, live on Social Security, cannot afford their prescription drugs. They simply can't because they're too expensive. And people who live on a fixed income have a problem. So we're going to pass a prescription drug plan. And everybody's committed to that. The president's committed to it. What form it will take is still the $64 billion question or whatever it costs. But I think that is on the horizon. We'll probably pass a budget next week in the House, and it's not one that I like very much because it includes an awful lot of money for what the president wants for his tax cuts, and it cuts, it really cuts a lot of funding that we give to hospitals and a lot of other programs. So, but it's part of the ritual that we have to go through in the House, and knowing full well that the Senate will do their thing, and then we'll see how it ends up. So, but in the healthcare field, people want change, but there's really a limited amount that Congress can really do. So let me just talk about politics for a minute. I know that the majority of the people in this room know this, but I want to state the obvious. The best thing that we have going politically in our state is Denny Hastert is the Speaker of the House. Nobody does more. When you have the Speaker of the House from your delegation, it means that you can get just about anything done that you want to get done. He controls everything. He controls the House agenda. He controls every bill that comes to the floor. And he has done a lot of good things for our state, not just for his district. And he helps everybody. And it's done in a very bipartisan way. And Denny has really done a great job as Speaker. He's done a great job as Speaker because he's not a lightning rod for our party. He sets the right tone for our party. And then as being a member of Congress from Illinois, he's just done a great job in really helping us do a lot of things in terms of transportation and infrastructure, helping the hospitals, and really trying to make sure that we get the money that we need to fund our hospitals. And, you name it, and he's been there. When people have approached him, they know that he'll produce and he'll get things done. And so it's just great to have him as our Speaker, and I think I know that he has just a tremendous rapport with the President. The President loves Denny and works so well with him, and I think as long as President Bush is in office, Denny Hastert will be Speaker. I don't want to predict what his political career will be, but I know that they work so close together, and they have such a great relationship. We lifted the term limits on the Speaker's position at the beginning of this Congress, mainly because the President wants really to have that kind of leadership in the House of Representatives, and Denny has been great. So he's in my opinion, he's the leader of our party in the state, and he's really been helpful, and he goes out and campaigns for people and really reaches out and does a lot of good and helps anybody that really reaches out to him. Our party is rebuilding in Illinois for obvious reasons. We've had it pretty good. The party's had it pretty good in state government. We held the governor's office for 25 years, and so maybe it is the other party's turn. I don't know, but the fact is that we've had good leadership from our party during the time that we've held the reins of state government, and now we'll see what happens. But we are rebuilding, and under Judy Barr Topinka, our state party chair, she's doing a great job. She has a lot of enthusiasm and energy, but it's a hard job to really energize people after you lose an election like we've just lost, and some of the embarrassment that's taken place under the previous administration. So, but we are rebuilding, and a part of her team is a woman from my hometown. Mary Alice Erickson is the vice chairman of the party, and she's working very hard to do a good grassroots, and so we'll see how it all happens. I wish Rod Blagojevich well. I think he won it fair and square. When Rod was in the House, his office was next to mine in the Cannon office building, and we used to walk back and forth for votes for 4 years together. I like Rod very much. I think he's a very decent, honorable, honest guy who won this thing. He's a very good politician. I will give him that. He won this on the fact that he worked very hard, and he went out and campaigned, and he went to every part of the state, and he convinced people that he was going to turn things around. Now I wish he would get with it and start making some moves to do it. But, we'll see. I mean, I can't say all these good things without saying something. But I like Rod very much. I really do. And I also want to say a word about Senator Durbin, just not because Mike is here, and Mike is a friend of mine, and we've been friends for a long time, but really, Senator Durbin and I have been a good tag team on a lot of appropriation stuff, and we have worked together. And he has been a good model for how do you get people in our state to work together. Between Hastert and Durbin and the rest of our delegation, you all in this room ought to be mighty proud. We've got good leadership in Illinois, and we're going to do our level best to do what we can to make sure Illinois gets its fair share, particularly in this transportation bill that we're going to pass in the next year. And all of that will mean for our state in terms of roads and bridges. Bill Lipinski will be at the forefront of that. But we do have a lot of good leadership in our state, and we do work together, and you all ought to be mighty proud of that. And I do wish the new governor well. I think he's got a tough job. I mean, the promises that he made and trying to comply with all of that and having a $5 billion debt to try and figure out, it's tough business. It really is. Governing is very hard. And but we wish him well, and I've told Rod that we will work with him in Washington and do all that we can to be helpful to him. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it, and you got a half hour to ask questions. You think you need to moderate this, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got to just, I have to deliver something to you anyway, so stick around. I have one question, and then we'll go to the thing. Whatever happened to the old-fashioned declaration of war? The Constitution prescribes that the Congress shall declare war. I know that there are resolutions that are passed, and oftentimes that has to go to give the president the kind of flexibility that he needs, but it really sort of irks me that we're bypassing the declaration of war, which is what Congress really, there should be an up or down vote, I think. That's my own view. Will you comment on that?
Tom has a column this Saturday. Be sure you buy his Sun-Times. He told me on the way over here he's against the war. He made it very clear to me, so be sure you read his column. That's why he's asking this question. The truth is that Congress has ignored that. We ignored it during the Clinton years. President Clinton wanted to go into the Balkans. He did go into the Balkans. We passed a resolution. Even during Desert Storm in 1991, when Congress passed a resolution, it was not a declaration of war. It was more of a support for President Bush 1 to allow him. So, you know, the direct answer is that Congress has ignored it. The leadership...
Why? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, because we want to try and support our president. This is something that he wants to do. And I think that... you know, Congress doesn't want to get into an extended debate about, you know, declaring war. And we've, I think, really left that prerogative to the president. I think it's more of a political judgment, a political move. And we didn't really stick it to Clinton. We did have a debate on Kosovo, but he made his decision, and you know, there was an invasion there. The resolution in 91 was a resolution. It really wasn't a declaration. And I think it's just the political judgment of the leaders of Congress to say, we're going to leave it up to the president to decide these things.
Questions?
I'd like to know, what can we do? What's the new world order going to look like? Are we going to restore it to what it was? And can we do it with the kind of rhetoric that's coming out of Washington?
Before you answer that, can I advise you that because we have television here, if you want to ask a question, go to the microphone. I think probably your words have been picked up, but from now on, people who have questions, go to that microphone. Go ahead.
Well, the answer is that nobody knows what the New World Order is going to be, but it's going to be different. The idea that France in particular is kind of stuck it in our eye. I think when we invade Iraq, I think people are going to come to the realization that France is playing footsie with Iraq. They're in cahoots with Iraq. I mean, this idea that they're just doing it because they don't believe in war is nonsense. It's a lot more than that. They're in cahoots with Saddam. They're selling him weapons. And I don't know if I should be saying that with that reporter he's got his microphone on and everything else.
Good.
Yeah, but anyway, that's what you're going to find out. We were in Germany in January, and just below Schroeder, there is tremendous cooperation in our military between the military in the United States and the military in Germany. We have a strong presence in Frankfurt. We were there I'm on the Intelligence Committee, and we were there with the Intelligence Committee. There's tremendous cooperation between the intelligence community in Germany and the United States. There's a lot more cooperation between our government, our officials, our military, our intelligence in Germany than you would ever have people believe. Part of the thing that's driven some of this, with all due respect to my friend from the media, is the media. You know, there was a protest in support of the war a couple of weeks ago in Washington, And I don't think anybody knew about it. But as soon as you get, 10 people carrying signs somewhere against it, my God, you get 5 cameras and 14 reporters. So, I'm not going to blame the media for all of this, because there are people against the war, and you can't discount that. But I don't know what the New World Order will be. I believe that the Arab countries will rally around our ability to build a new regime in Iraq, because they care about the Iraqi people. They care about the Muslims that live there. The vast majority of people are Arabs there. I think the Arab world will really help us in our ability to rebuild. If you talk to Arab leaders privately, they hate Saddam. They don't like what he's done to his people, but they also don't like the idea of war that's going to kill probably a lot of innocent Arab people. They don't like that part of it, but nobody knows. I mean, if Condoleezza Rice were here, or Don Rumsfeld, I don't know if they could tell you what the position of countries are going to be. But I guarantee you this, if some of these countries get in trouble, you know who they're going to look to? The good old USA. They always do. When their economy goes in the tank, or when somebody attacks them, or, when they need help, they're going to come to us. And, but, for now, a couple of countries are getting a lot of publicity. There's at least 40 countries that are with us on this, but they never get the publicity. I wish I had a better answer. The truth is, I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows. Yes, ma'am.
Congressman, I'm Joyce Saxon on the board of the City Club of Chicago. Apropos of what you just said, I'm always reminded of a quote of Drew Pearson, who was a very famous World War II commentator, who said the French would never forgive us as long as there's one Frenchman left alive who remembers that we bailed him out of 2 world wars. What you just said reminded me of Drew Pearson. Okay. In lauding all of our Illinois leaders in Washington, was it by accident or design that you omitted the name of Senator Fitzgerald?
Design. You know what? I don't want to be. If you want me to, talk about that, I will. But it was by design.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I've said some things about. Well, first of all, let me say this: when Peter was running 4.5 years ago, I helped him a lot. He carried my district. When he came to my district, we had a huge rally for him in Peoria. We had fundraisers for him. We helped him get elected with the idea that we'd have a Republican senator, somebody who we could work with, talk to, that would be a part of our team. And the truth is that Peter likes, he fashions himself as an independent. And, that's not the way we operate in the Illinois delegation. We work together. We try and do things together that make sense for the state. We may not always agree on issues. We don't really talk about issues in the delegation because we know there are big, wide differences in philosophy. But when it comes to what's good for the state of Illinois, whether it's the Lincoln Presidential Library, whether it's the Wacker Drive project, you name it, whether it's the Children's Hospital, whether it's Northwestern, whether it's Loyola, whatever it is, we all pull together. And, what I've said is that during the time that Peter's been senator, he's been missing in action on working with our delegation. On the politics of it, he just simply has not really been that much of a participant in party politics. And I guess when you fashion yourself as an independent, then that's the way that you will be. And he does that. And, when the election's over, people want us to come together, set aside party loyalties. That's why I said I did about Rod Blagojevich. I wish Rod well. I mean, I'm a resident of the state. I want him to do well. And he's the governor. He earned it fair and square. And, as a delegation, if we don't work together, we're not going to accomplish anything. No one of the 435 in the House gets their own way. If you want to pass a bill, you got to get some Democrats to vote with you on it. And the same is true in the Senate. If you want the state of Illinois to really be vibrant and get things done and get things accomplished, we have to work together and ignore party loyalty. And frankly, I say what I said before, he hasn't been a part of that. And, He and I had a very frank discussion. We had a meeting about this. I told him my feelings, and, he shared his feelings, and so, we'll see what happens.
Hi, Congressman Joel.
I made your story, right, Mike? I got you.
It's a
Yes,
hard
sir.
question to follow. Joel Cohen, CEO of Richard Hoffman Corporation. I know you're involved in some fascinating areas. I wonder if you might speak to your role in terms of the Homeland Security situation, and also the point about declaring war from Congress. I don't know if it maybe wasn't since World War II. I remember Korea was a police action. I don't even remember, though, what Vietnam was, but a lot of us went through that experience. And the third part of the question is, what do you do as a congressman to keep, this Iraqi war evolving into another Vietnam?
Well, I don't think Iraq will be a Vietnam. I think if Secretary Rumsfeld were here, and what he's told members of the Congress is that it'll last between, 4 days and 4 months. It's going to be longer than 4 days. This is not going to be a Vietnam. It just simply is not. We're going to use some of the most, that's why I said it's going to cost $100 billion. We're going to use the most sophisticated weaponry that we have, the most sophisticated bombs. We have our ships positioned off ashore. Before any men and women ever go on the ground there, there's going to be an awful lot of bombing takes place. And so it's not going to be something, we're going to be there for a long time, but the war isn't going to last a long time. I think the president's goal is to bring about regime change. And they believe, if you listen to Secretary Powell or Rumsfeld, and we've had briefings from them, they have a plan in place for regime change. They've talked to military people there, and, they've got, just like with Karzai in Afghanistan, he was handpicked by our government. And it's not perfect, but he's doing the best he can. And the same was true in the Balkans. Our intelligence people are on the ground there looking for people who can be helpful once the regime is out of there. With respect to Homeland Security, if there's one thing I learned as a member of the Joint Intelligence Committee that studied 9/11, it's this. The FBI has had a culture going way back to Hoover. I call it the Hoover Culture, where FBI agents are trained not to talk to one another. Thankfully, the new director of the FBI, Robert Mueller, who we just had a 2.5-hour briefing from the other day, is changing the culture. But it won't change until they recruit and hire new people. The idea of holding close information, not sharing it with the person next to you, not even sharing it between offices, is passé. Those days are gone. Mueller and Tenet, the director of the CIA, meet every day. Sometimes they meet with the president. The capture of this second in command of Al-Qaeda, all of that information is being shared between the CIA and FBI. They're working 24/7 to round up a lot of people whose names are on those computers who live right here in the United States. So Mueller is changing the culture. The idea of holding close information and not sharing it is gone, thankfully. And so if there's one thing that you should walk out of here with, is that our people are working together in sharing information, and they're doing it with local law enforcement people, which hadn't been done before. You would have local police chiefs and local sheriffs complain all the time about FBI investigations that they never knew anything about local people. And it would be so irritating to them. Now you have these joint task force. You have one right here in Chicago that combines all the resources. They get their information from the CIA and the FBI, comes right into Chicago, and they have the ability to send it out all over the state. So that has changed. If any good came of 9/11, if any good came of it, it's that our law enforcement people, our intelligence people, are getting the information, they're analyzing it, and they're sharing it. And that is a sea change, but it's going to take a long time to complete it. It's just started. And it will really take a whole new regime of new, bright people coming on board at the CIA and the FBI before it can be accomplished. And for some of the older ones to move out. Yes, sir.
Jeff Berkowitz, host and producer of Public Affairs, airing every Monday night at 8:30 p.m. Channel 21 on CAN TV.
I'd love to join you. I've never been invited.
Well, you're invited right now.
Okay.
Congressman LaHood, let me see if I can test the breadth and depth of your apparent distaste for the junior senator from the state of Illinois, Senator Fitzgerald. Can you tell us whether come next March 2004, will you be running in the Republican primary against Senator Fitzgerald? And if not, if you don't plan to do that, will you commit today to support him should there be a challenge by somebody else?
Well, first of all, I like my job in the House. I began this presentation by saying that I love the House of Representatives. I think if I stay in the House for another 10 years, I can do a lot of good for the district I represent, the people I represent, and for the state of Illinois, and for the country. The House is a place where you can get something done if you stay around long enough. And I have the good fortune, I think, of having enough support in my district for the next few years that I hope I can maintain that support and stay where I'm at. I don't want to become the 100th senator in a body where it would take a long time to get anything done. I have no interest in the Senate, none. What I have an interest in is making the senator from my party a better senator for the people that I represent and for the people that he represents. And that was my whole goal. I mean, I supported Peter. I told you that. I worked hard for him. He won my district in part with my support. And as I told you before in the other answer, we'll see what happens. He's got another 6-7 months here to, try and work with us and get some things done and get some things accomplished. And, when it comes to December, you won't see me filing for the U.S. Senate. You'll see me filing for the 18th District of Illinois, which I'm proud to represent. And we'll see if anybody wants to file against Peter. I don't know if anybody will come forward, and I'll decide then who I'm going to support.
Well, hypothetically, if Andy McKenna were the person to file against, would you support him over Senator Fitzgerald?
Well, I don't know that much about Andy. I really don't. I met with him once. I met with, and I think Peter's trying to reach out to some members of the delegation. Are you going to support Peter?
I'm fair and balanced. We don't support anybody on public affairs.
Pardon me?
We don't support anybody on public affairs.
Alan? One of my constituents, by the way, thankfully,
Yeah, I'm glad
to ask a question.
I can. Representative Duncan's here. First off, I'm glad you're going to be staying in our district. I have a domestic question and I have a foreign policy question. Domestically, several years ago when the transportation bill was passed, Illinois came out of that as a loser state, which we have not been in prior years. What's your sense of where we're going to go in terms of the transportation bill this next year and how Illinois will fare with that?
Let me just answer that real quick, Alan. Hastert, Lipinski, Durbin, and others we've been meeting, and we are determined to get in there up to our elbows and get our fair share for Illinois, more than we send out there. And I think we got a good shot at doing it because of the people involved, and as I said, because of the speaker. Whether we will or not, we'll see. But I think Denny is committed to making Illinois a state that gets back more than we send out there.
Let me ask you a foreign policy question with regard to Iraq. Let's assume that the war goes 4 days to 4 months, somewhere in that range. I guess what my concern is, and what I think a lot of people I talk to, their concerns are, is what happens after that. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about sort of your concerns about the aftermath, what your read is on longevity, what we're going to have to do. Can you give us a few of those thoughts?
Well, I think we'll be there for a long time, and I do think the Arab world will really embrace the idea of trying to come in there and be helpful with money, maybe with some people, but we're going to have men and women in the armed services in Iraq, I would say, for a minimum of 5 years to really bring about regime change. You know, the whole Kurdish issue up in the north is a real sensitive issue, and whether they're, they want to really be a part of the Iraqi new regime.
That was my follow-up question.
Yeah, I mean,
what do we do
it's
about
a real,
the Kurds and how do we handle
it's a
that?
delicate balancing act because they may want to do their own thing and not really be a part of a new regime. And but I know that Colin Powell and his team and others have been thinking a lot about this. They've identified people who might step in a new regime. And, we're going to be in Afghanistan for a long time. But there will be other countries that will help us there. Afghanistan has to be completely rebuilt. New schools, new roads, new churches, new houses, and it's very costly, but other countries are helping there too. I haven't been to Afghanistan, but some members of Congress have, and I can tell you this, they love the United States there. If you go to the Balkans, they love the United States. For the first time, they have freedom, hope, opportunity. They're a long way from where they want to be, but they are out from underneath the thumb of these thugs in Al-Qaeda and bin Laden, who is no longer in the country, and the same will be true in Iraq. If you talk privately, as our intelligence people have to the Iraqi people, they're ready for Saddam to leave. They can't wait for it to happen. That it? Oh, no, I guess not.
Question?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, my name's Jim Allen. By the way, my mother-in-law from Chillicothe, who used to live in the Heights, sends her warmest regards.
Another voter.
And what you were just saying just brought to mind another situation that happened earlier this week in Serbia, and what your take is on whether or not that'll backfire, that the event that happened earlier this week with the assassination, or whether that could lead to more destabilization with Milosevic's former comrades.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate the Prime Minister there was trying to bring about a lot of reform and change, and some people believe it was the mafia there that was involved, but it's obviously people who don't want to, take account for the reforms and be a part of them and really. But those things are going to happen. When you look at the 225-year history of our own country, think of the turmoil we've gone through, and think of all the people who have gone through an awful lot, some of whom have lost their lives to get freedom of this or freedom of that, and to really bring about change in our own country. And then you go to a place like the Balkans where, it's just been a few years. They're just starting. It's going to take a couple hundred years before it's going to take a long time. Just by illustration, I said 200, but it's going to take a long time for these things to get turned around and to really root out these bad people who don't want change because they've lost their power and their authority. And the same will be true in Afghanistan, the same will be true in Iraq, but it takes a long time. The Prime Minister thing is most unfortunate. I don't think it'll be a permanent setback, though. I think they will continue to move ahead.
More questions? Then may I ask the follow-up?
Yes, sir.
I know that the symbol of the United States should not be the ostrich. We are involved and should be. But I constantly think of Senator Robert A. Taft in the debate on NATO, which he grievously erred in voting against NATO, saying that the day will come when we will be the world's policeman. And I think of not only what he would do, but what President Dwight Eisenhower would do. He who kept us out of Vietnam. He who settled the war, a stalemate war in Korea. Is it possible, sir, that we are almost surreptitiously moving into a point where we are the 911 of the world, and should we be?
Well, first of all, we are the greatest power in the world, the greatest economic power. The economic engine that drives our country can't be surpassed by anyone. We're the greatest military power. The laws that we pass in our country are used and actually replicated in other places in the world when democracies are established. When other countries fall from communism, they pick up the democratic system that we have here. They use our country and our Constitution as the model. This is the greatest country in the world. So when somebody, when you get in trouble or when you need help, who do you go to? You go to people who are your heroes. You go to people who can help you. And so we are always going to be the beacon of hope and freedom and opportunity for places in the world. And I wouldn't characterize it as the policeman of the world, because I think when you look, and certainly in our own hemisphere, go to South America, go to Mexico, go to Canada, we're not the policemen of those countries. But if they got in trouble, they certainly would come to us. We're involved in a region of the world right now. We're certainly not the policemen in the Balkans. We still have men and women there, but they're running their own countries. They're emerging democracies. Look what's happened in Russia. They're emerging democracies there. And but we will help when we're asked to help. And we will help when we think it's in our best interest to help. And that's the way it is and the way it should be. That's what's made America great. And that's why people continue to look for us. Let me just end on an optimistic note. This is a great country. It's a great country because we can gather here today on St. Patty's weekend and and celebrate St. Patty's weekend and wear our green and do what we want and criticize our government and say what we want about our president and think what we want and be conflicted about the things that folks in the state do or folks in the city do or folks at the federal level do, and that is the greatness of our country. And I know none in this room would give it up for anything. And that's why America's great, and that's why it's such a privilege, as I said, for me to serve in the House and to be able to have opportunities to come to Chicago from time to time and visit with all of you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Jay Doherty, who cannot be here, we present to you an honorary one-year membership for your Public Policy Forum Luncheon Series remarks, which contributed to making the City Club of Chicago the premier public affairs forum it is in the state of Illinois. Thank you very much. When you have coffee, tea, or whatever, we hope you use this mug. It's made in China, and think of it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.